Hi, what I'd like to do in this section is demonstrate a little bit about how Revit and 3ds Max interact with one another when you're using the file linking in 3ds Max and decide not to bind your file. In other words, it creates a live link between the DWG file that Revit produces and that DWG file then linked into 3ds Max. So let's go ahead here and create something. We'll start with a wall and create something which has some materials on it, so a brick and metal stud, and I will draw something chained together in this direction and place a wall there. I'm just going to do something very simple because really all I want to do is demonstrate the interactivity between the two programs. So here's my my object, and let's shade this with edges so we can see pretty clearly the walls that are brick face, the ones that are red, and the interior walls which are gypsum board. I'll go back to the level 1 plan. Add a door, and perhaps a couple of windows, and make some fairly sizable ones. Okay, so go back to the 3D view and you can see, oh, they're pretty small actually. So let's make a change there. Oh, there we go. Being selected, yeah, just Windows. Okay, let's change that to 1200 high. Okay. So now the process is the same thing as we did previously with a more sophisticated file. We're going to export this in a CAD format, and remember that it's very important that you do create a DWG file in a 3D view. It's very important because otherwise you're going to get whatever view you have currently on the screen. So let's go ahead and just call this test. You'll see here it's saving a 2007 DWG file, and we'll just click on save. Takes just an instant. Okay, so once that's done, we'll bring up 3ds Max and we'll do a file link. Bring up the file link manager, find a file, and yes, I did put that in the desktop, new folder here. There we go. Go always here to presets, make sure it's set to Revit. Go back to attach and say go ahead and attach this file. This here we could just ignore. That's just an error message relating to some proxy objects. Anyway, so here's our file that we've imported, and you can see there's some well, materials already assigned. We're not going to get into materials just as yet. What we want to do though is to look at again the interactivity between the files. So if you go back now to Revit, there's your original element. So let's just select the walls. Now one of the things that Revit does by default is your walls here have a certain height assigned to them. Now sometimes when you create walls in Revit, you're going to actually constrain them to levels. So let's say here you say, well, these walls, they're going to go from my ground floor or level 1 up to level 2, and they'll stop. So I'll click on OK, and that actually brings that down to wherever level 1 was. You can see where level 1 was pretty clearly if you switch to a elevation view, and that is of course something you can change. For some point you say, well, actually level 2 is not 4,000 but it's 3,600. Of course we're dealing with millimeters here. You can see that the entire wall has also shifted now because it is well constrained to that level. So let's go now to back to the 3D view. I mean, we could do anything we want here. You know, put in another door. Let's say we'll put one in here. Maybe put in another couple of windows, different sizes perhaps. It's a little bit harder with windows because the sill heights don't get placed automatically here in the 3D view. So let's go back to the first level, put in our windows from here, and of course we could be displaying more than one view at the same time, but here I'm just choosing to have one view at a time, because as you can see they get pretty small at this resolution. Okay, so you can see again we have many different views. Now here, once again, make sure the 3D view is the current view, and go back and save the file, or I should say export it. I will use exactly the same name. It's important for the link. And let's go back to 3ds Max, and what we should see when we go back to the File Link Manager is that when we go to the Files tab, that it identifies, of course, that that file has been resaved, so we reload it. So we select it, reload it. It's going to give us a few reload options. Nothing really important here to talk about at this point, but I will like to point out for future reference something here in the Advanced tab that has to do with materials. Both Revit and 3ds Max have materials. If you are importing a scene from Revit and wish to keep all of the material definitions that you have created in Revit, and ignore everything that you do in Max, then you don't select these boxes. But that is normally not the case, because typically you're going to change your materials once you bring them into Max. So you'll want to, when you make reloads, make sure that these two check boxes have been enabled. So we'll click on OK. Now again, nothing much has happened in terms of the materials here, but you can see the file has completely changed now. You can see the height of the walls is not as high. Our windows have been placed at different locations. New windows, I should say, have been placed. New door. Okay, and anyway, it's that's the basics of the linking between Revit and 3ds Max. As we get into it more, obviously there'll be some more things to look into, especially as I've started to talk about the material definitions and how that all works. Okay.